Yep.
Good, and people get to see our faces again.
Welcome to the 21st century, where this is, the best we can do. We got a bunch of notifications that a bunch of people are alive and stuff. Oh, unfortunately, the float thing got messed up, but whatever. It's not gonna. No one cares too much anyway. So, hey everyone, I'm pretty sure you can all see us live. If give us a holler if we're not. Just roughing it, roughing it as per usual. Let's see. Let me actually refresh your page. See if we see something. Not quite, but apparently, yeah, on Twitter's looking good. Let me hit up the Facebook. I mean the YouTubes. See how that's going.
No one cares about YouTube. No one uses YouTube anymore. They censor too much of any content they disagree with. So
But that's pretty
we're
much
good
all.
on Facebook. So yeah, this is episode 15 of Live Free and Rants. Sorry we missed you last week. I had some work obligations and I didn't have internet anyways. So we're back this week, episode 15. We're here every Monday, starting sometime between 2 and 5 usually.
Yeah, three is the time we're mostly aiming for consistency's sake. But do what we can, right? So the world is still burning. No, it isn't. Yes, it is. Who knows? Whatever. Um, the one thing I have noticed that's really gotten a lot of people up in arms lately has been the canceling of Aunt Jemima. Lovely old Aunt Jemima. So,
Which has been I mean, that product's been available for 100 years, more than 100 years. And now because it's 2020, we have to cancel it because it portrays a person of color, I think is the politically correct way to say it now, on a bottle of syrup. And I guess it portrays like the house slave, the whatever slave lived in the house and kind of fed the family and took care of the children and all of that. So we have to cancel it.
yes, and this is one of those areas where I don't really care. I don't care too much because first off, I don't drink that stuff. I drink real. I actually don't really drink syrup at all because that would mean I'd have major diabetes issues. But I don't use that syrup at all. I use real New Hampshire maple syrup because that's where we
Well,
live.
yeah, it's garbage syrup. It's crap. It's like sugar in a bottle. It's garbage.
That would be giving it too much of a compliment. No, it's more corn syrup in a bottle. But
Ye-
so as far as like the labels concerned, I have seen some of the old versions of the labels that look really, really not cool at all. I understand the name of Aunt for Aunt Jemima. I understand that it's very negative connotations in the past, all that kind of stuff. At the same time, there was an actual Aunt Jemima who was, who the bottle was modeled after, and her family's upset that their part of history, their contribution is just sort of being scrubbed out. So it's kind of, there's a lot on either side. It's like, well, do you like the connotations that it represents? And there's also, well, what about the place in history it represents that's not just negative connotations, the positive progress, the way you actually, have a person of color, as it were, on as a major brand, receiving royalties from it, etc. And it's like erasing that person doesn't necessarily make things different. I don't really care. There's a lot of both sides, but it's basically no one really noticed this or had a problem with it, or I'm sure there were some, right? But the public at large did not care until now, until like 2 seconds ago, when they're just like, oh, this is an outrage because everyone's upset at Aunt Jemima for kicking the what.
Everything.
Everyone's upset at Aunt Jemima for beating on, kneeling on people's necks, killing people. No, wait, that wasn't Aunt Jemima did it, was it? My memory is getting foggy these
No,
days.
that was a police officer in geez, I don't even remember what city. Milwaukee? No, it
Minneapolis,
wasn't
wasn't it?
Milwaukee. It was Minnesota somewhere. I think. I don't even remember. But I mean, we started this 16 weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
This is episode 15. We missed a week. Sorry. Um, and it was like the beginning of the coronavirus thing. But we couldn't have picked a better time to start a
Ranting.
podcast talking about the things that we end up talking about. We had kind of a different vision in mind, talking about local politics, state politics,
Which
and
we
federal
still do.
politics, and well, we still do. But coronavirus came in. March came in like a lion and went out like a no. I'm sorry, it came in like a lamb and went out like a lion, which is not how it's supposed to go. And now, I mean, here we are, almost 4 months later, and we're talking about there's the Chaz and the Chop or whatever it's called now, and there's rioting and looting. Coronavirus is apparently still a thing, except for when people are rioting and looting. Trump's back to doing rallies now. Aunt Jemima's canceled because people, and I can't imagine. The cancel culture is fueled by white Zennials, I guess they're called, which is the
Zoodles.
generation after millennials, Zoodles, Zennials, whatever they're called.
They're supposed
These
to
are
be
the
called
people
Zoomers.
that come after the millennials.
It's supposed to be called Zoomers, as in like boomer,
Zoomers,
but
right?
Zoom.
But like AOC, AOC and her group of thugs have hijacked the Z and turned millennials into Zennials, and they just want to cancel everything that is offensive, and apparently everything is offensive.
Yes.
Everybody is offended by everything, and it's stupid.
Yeah.
Grow up.
Yeah.
I have never walked down the cereal aisle, and I'm Irish. I have never walked down the cereal aisle and looked at the box of Lucky Charms and thought, "Oh my God, that is so offensive to my people." You're making fun of the potato famine and the Irish slaves, and there were Irish slaves, and like the IRA and the Brit. It's like, come on, grow up.
So
It's a frigging bottle of crap syrup. No one cares.
yeah, no one cares to begin with, and it is kind of funny how people will basically find anything to be oppressed, anything to freak out about, and in this case, because of recent events and stuff, you see there are some people that still do go through a rough time in life that most people don't go into, some communities, and that is tragic for two reasons. The biggest reason is, of course, those people. Of course, the people in the community suffering, right? People in the African American community who have a hard time or have to look over their shoulder when there's a cop or whatever it is. But the other thing that sucks is now there's something that privileged white activists can now attach themselves to and say, we'll do whatever we want and get all the attention on us, but since no one cares about us, we'll say it's in someone else's name. And then people will pay attention to us. I mean, I don't know if you're a Instagram goer, but if you ever jump on Instagram, you'll see tons of everyone's feed has like a black mark at some point, and it's not just everyone. It's actually pretty few, but all the people who do attention for a living are all on there. And yeah, let me tell you.
Yeah. Yeah, my wife follows all those what do they call them? Influencers?
Yeah.
Yeah, she follows all, and she listens to all these mom podcasts and all left-wing moms from California, and then she listens to like the New York Times daily podcast, and I'm like, oh my gosh,
Yes.
stop! Why do you do this to yourself? Why do you do this to yourself?
To avoid the echo chamber is
But
why I would.
that's a different story.
Yes. And so for those
That's a good reason, right? To get both perspectives is important. You need to break out of your echo chamber and hear the rationale behind whatever you disagree with, because you can't form a rational argument against it if you don't hear the other side of the argument.
of course. Or maybe
I don't
you're
know
wrong.
I don't know how she does. I've listened to
Yeah.
the New York Times, maybe. Or yeah, well, I mean that happens too, right? Like, I mean, I don't know how long ago Black Lives Matter started. It was maybe 5 years ago with what the heck? in Florida,
Was it
and I feel bad for forgetting his
Trayvon
name.
Martin? Was that where it started? It could have
Yeah,
been another
Trayvon
one.
Martin in I think
Zimmerman.
it might have been that one. It might have been another one, but it was around Zimmerman. It was around the
Yeah.
same time, and I was one of those where I was like, oh, just listen to the police. You have nothing to worry about. Just do what they tell you. Don't resist. Blah 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 blah. Like, oh, they must have had it coming because they were resisting for some reason. That's the way I thought 5 years
Yeah.
ago, and I mean, my views have evolved since then. Now I every case is obviously different. You know, um, there's very few instances in which I think deadly force is justified, and I wish it was used less. But if somebody, for example, if somebody broke into my house at 2 o'clock in the morning, and I live on it's a 1-story house. I don't have a second floor. It's not like I can just stand at the top of the stairs and guard my property and guard my family from a distance. I'm coming out blazing because my son's door is closer to the front door than my bedroom door. So if you break into my house, I'm going to give you like one warning, and I'm going to protect my family above all else. And there's different instances. Now, the police are, in theory, supposed to be trained to de-escalate situations, not escalate them. And of course, every instance is different. And if you get somebody that's resisting arrest and then you go deeper into it, and you have to differentiate between like a justified use of force arrest and just like a regular, like you pull somebody over for a traffic light out, and and things escalate from there. and then they end up getting their neck kneeled on or whatever. So
Basically, there's a lot of nuance to this.
my
And
point
there's
being,
also an evolution of your own
right,
personal views about the subject. However, there's a limit to the craziness. And let me roll right into something I saw over the weekend. I was driving around Bedford, unfortunately, and right outside the Whole Foods, there was a big group of people protesting the Whole Foods with megaphones and everything. Hey, 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 go! Whole Foods got to go, and all that kind of crap. And I'm like, what did Whole Foods do now? And it was a bunch of like Black Lives Matter signs and stuff. And I'm like, oh god, did Whole Foods kill a guy? Like, what happened? Did some poor guy, was he shopping in Whole Foods and then someone just hit him over the head with a quinoa sack and then he's all dead and now they're like, they got to boycott Whole Foods or something because they killed a guy? No. It turns out people are boycotting Whole Foods because, similar in the vein of Starbucks, you have employee uniforms and you're not supposed to wear your own things to associate the company with other things like that. And I believe someone was not allowed to wear Black Lives Matter branded stuff with their employee uniform. And then, therefore, let's defund and cancel Whole Foods. And, I mean, you know what I didn't see? I didn't see qualified immunity end now signs outside the Bedford Police Department. No, I did not see that. I did not see let's fix the problem. I just saw let's try to cancel this grocery store because they have like they have a employee wear policy. And even though I'm sure they completely support the movement, but it's like, why, like, do you think that, like, how does that help anyone? Seriously.
yeah, the crazy is they just they take everything overboard, everything. Like there's no rational, like sensible position to what they're doing, and it drives me crazy.
Yes.
Right? Because when George Floyd happened, pretty much everybody in the country, police officers, police chiefs, politicians, regular people, everybody saw that video and said, that dude should be alive. The cop should not have kneeled on his neck for 8 minutes. He should be alive.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't meet, I mean, there were a couple people. Of course, there's always a couple people, but pretty much like 99% of the country was like, George Floyd should be alive, and that cop is a douche and should probably be in jail. Everybody said the same thing. And, like if you want to have a couple protests and, some vigils and bring awareness to the issue, everybody understands that.
Mm-hmm.
But then they started burning down cities, and it was like, well, what the fuck? What
Yeah,
are
of
you doing?
course.
Why you're like, you just lost a ton of support. Like everybody was with you, and then you lit shit on fire, and now nobody cares about you anymore because you're just idiots. And now everybody like is flocking back to their tribes. You have the Thin Blue Line crowd, and you have the BLM crowd, and you have to be in one camp or the other. And there's no like rational, sensible like. Can't we just like agree on
Mm-hmm.
police? Use of force should be highly regulated, highly controlled, and police should be highly accountable when they use force.
Yes,
I think
there's
that's pretty reasonable.
yes, and there's so many different. I mean, I would go pretty radical with institutional changes and reforms to do this. But even if you don't agree with that kind of stuff, there's at least you should fire and prosecute these people, and police departments should face more pressure to fire people who use excessive force. That's like the very bare minimum. I don't think anyone disagrees with that. Then there's layers on top of that, such as ending qualified immunity or making abuse settlements come out of police pensions and things like that. And then you get all the way radical to restructure police departments to completely defund and abolish them and all their stuff. There's a huge spectrum of solutions, but like everyone's kind of on board to like solve some. But never basically there's a lot of people there's a lot of people who are directly affected by this kind of thing that are very upset, and there's a lot of well-meaning people who are on their side too, who are trying to help out, and then there's a giant buffer of casually offended people that just can't wait for the next thing to get upset about. And it's funny because this whole cancel culture thing has hit, like, now that there's this wave of we're all getting out and mobilizing in the streets against bad thing. Again, in this case, extremely bad thing, something that really is terrible. But then it's like, all right, you already protested, everyone's kind of on your side, and it's like, what, do you just go home? Do you just follow up and make sure the stuff you demanded is actually being done? Or do you just try to find someone else to crucify? And it seems to be option 3 for most people. And because so now this is the cancel culture gear shift to where we go toward it's still cancel culture, but it's not let's cancel bad people. Well, let me put it this way. I wouldn't say the whole BLM protest thing is cancel culture at all. It's people are upset over people being treated a certain way and want institutional reforms. Cancel culture is when you cancel a person off of their medium, say they're a TV host or whatever like that. You cancel them because they are a bad person and they haven't been dealt with. So cancel culture started, I don't know when it started, but it did start. It started with a few prominent public figures. Like, I would say the zenith of this would be Harvey Weinstein, because he was a rich and powerful person who basically got away with a litany of sexual abuses against women because of his power. And finally, he all caught up with them, and he got actual criminal charges against him. He got actually put away for criminal activity, not just canceled. And then you get Bill Cosby, who's another one of those people who, he got away with a lot because he was well liked and popular and famous. And then it finally caught up to him, and he got heavy criminal charges against him. Not only did he lose his stand-up career or whatever, but he got put away, right? And then you get to our buddy Louis C.K., who didn't do anything criminal. He just did some, sketchy things in front of some people that probably weren't okay with that. Some of them could have been, some of them thought it was a joke, but he made a lot of people uncomfortable by doing nasty things in front of them that he did not make extra sure that they wanted to. And so that I would call him like the first big cancel victim, because he kind of did nothing criminal. But he did kind of lose a lot of money.
Nothing. He didn't assault. Anybody.
Yes, but so he.
Yeah, I mean, what he did was like creepy. It's creepy as shit. Like, I'm like asking people if he could pleasure himself while looking at them, and like as soon as he got like a yes, he was like, okay, off to the races. And like if somebody asked me that, I'd be like,
No.
and like, oh, and if they were like, oh, that was a yes, and they like just, I was like, what, like, whoa, wait a minute,
Yeah.
hold on, I didn't, but so that's like what you're talking. You didn't like make sure they were okay with it. He just kind
Yes.
of like, he got
Like,
it like a soft yes,
and
and he was just like, here we go.
it's a
But
strange
like you said, he didn't
request.
do anything criminal. He didn't rape anybody.
It's a strange
Yeah, it's
request,
very strange.
and it's coming from a comedian who's funny, and he's coming to another comedian. So the odds that someone would think that's not necessarily serious and also make a flippant kind of answer to that are relatively high. So there's a lot of people that didn't actually say, "Oh, am I really wanting to see this right now?" There are a lot of people that are just like, "Yeah, whatever, pull it out, big boy." And they're like, "Oh no, he's actually pulling it out. Oh no, I did not understand this."
Oh
So,
no, 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 no! Put it away! Put
and
it away!
so to be fair, I do think that that kind of stuff is something that would probably you should probably get fired for. I don't know if you be canceled forever, but like if you're an executive or you're a news producer or something, and you start doing this with the employees, yeah, probably fire you. Now, does that mean you never get a job again? No, but we're getting this escalation where now those targets are they're targeting more and more people about weirder and weirder things, about more and more edge cases, and trying to destroy their entire livelihoods because of that. And so here we go to our first little snippet of the day. Chris D'Elia, who's not one of my favorite comedians, but he is a funny guy. Essentially, when he was in his younger years, like I would say early 30s, maybe. He's about almost 40 now, but like somewhere in the last 10 years, he talked to female fans, and he basically was flirting with them, doing whatever. A lot of them were not of appropriate age. We're talking a striking an age range of like 16 to 21, some of them. And this goes to where he should not have been. First off, he didn't meet up with anyone. He didn't actually do anything. He talked with, and flirted and made some, he shouldn't be talking to young girls like that. Now, how young were they? They're a little bit all over the map. There's, how should he have been talking to him? Probably not. No. Did he say anything bad? Probably kind of not. Did he know what age they were? Some cases he could have suspected. Other cases, no. Basically, he did even less wrong than Louis C.K. But he did some stuff that's probably pretty creepy, and now people are trying to go after him. And again, as it says here, he says that all his relationships have been both legal and consensual, and then he also said that in his youth he's done some stuff that he probably wouldn't have done today, and that kind of that's all right. You learned something embarrassing about this guy. Why are you Snapchatting young girls back then? Not good. But they're trying to cancel him and his career over this, and this is a little crazy. Now I'm gonna hit the net. Yeah, go ahead and say
So
something.
how old was he when he was doing or allegedly doing these inappropriate things?
Around 30.
Does it say? I didn't read that.
Yeah, so he's around 30.
Okay, I mean the 30-year-old Snapchatting 16-year-olds is pretty creepy.
Yeah, if it's so, most of them were
But
17 to 18.
if that's
19.
the extent of it,
Yeah.
yeah. So I mean, it's legal. It's creepy. It's legal, but it's creepy. In New Hampshire, the age of consent is 16 unless somebody is in a position of power over the other person. So still creepy. Like,
yeah, not cool, but not like.
I mean, well, I mean, so it depends, right? Like who he works for, because like if he works for NBC, which he's standing in front of an NBC banner on that snippet, in NBC. It depends, right? Like, because New Hampshire, let's take New Hampshire for example. New Hampshire is an at-will state. So if let's say I worked for, or you worked for, the local, let's say you were running a political campaign, even because it's 2020 and it's like all everybody focuses on. So let's say you're working for like a U.S. Senate campaign, and you're like a 40-year-old staffer, and these things come out about the things that you did a decade ago. You being inappropriate with underage women. That, and I'm using politicians because it's a more pronounced case where it's like whatever you do reflects back on your candidate.
Yeah.
And that candidate has like, so if you're even if you're 40 and that was like a decade ago, the fact that you did that reflects back on your candidate, and it's like, oh, now your candidate is okay with this super creepy comedian dude like trolling young women at nightclubs, and like texting them after and
Yeah.
Snapchatting them,
And that,
or whatever the case may be. But so that I use that because like even if it's like Whole Foods or if it's the local brewery down the street, like if that's going to reflect back on the employer, then they absolutely have every right to fire you. Now, like you said, I don't think he should be canceled forever and never hold another job again, because that's like not. I mean, and it's up to the employer. At the end of the day, the employer has to make a decision and say, do they bring in more value than this is going to hurt, right? And that's how the free market works. So if they're looking at it and they're sitting in their boardroom, or if it's a sole proprietor, they're thinking about it and they're saying, 10 years ago, this guy did some weird stuff, but he's worked here for 3 years or 4 years, and I've never seen anything inappropriate, and he's married and has 2 kids. So maybe he used to be kind of creepy, but he is obviously not that person today, and I'm gonna stick with him. Or they might say, well, I saw him talking to a young woman the other day, and it seemed kind of inappropriate. So just to err on the side of caution, I don't want that affecting my business because it's my livelihood. I'm going to have to let him go. Here's a severance check. I hope wish you luck in the future. Straighten your shit out, dude.
Yeah, and now
you know what I mean?
In interest of all context, he's a self-employed stand-up comedian who obviously has deals with Netflix or whatever else to do specials. He's not, and then he's an actor too. He does some shows. In fact, I believe in one show he specifically portrays a pedophile, which is kind of hilarious in a dark sort of a way. But wow. I mean, and here's the next slide of this from one of his accusers. I don't know if you can read the whole thing. She said, "I lied about my age, though I never technically specified and made it clear I was too young for him, because I was starstruck and excited that my favorite comedian was paying attention to me and feared he'd stop when he found out I was barely legal. I was 19. So she was 19. He was around 30. And he thought she was a little older, like early 20s. And he's 30. And, he was paying attention to her because she's a fan. And, he's trying to get somewhere with her. And it's like, oh, man, so much gray area there. Like now if you're a popular person and then you have young people who are paying attention to you, like young attractive fans, you're like, well, can I date fans? And it's like, yeah, absolutely, I guess. Some people don't want to do it, but then it's like, okay, now she's young, she's impressionable. Is she maybe like, can you maybe get away with more than you otherwise would because she's starstruck? Yeah, is it not a good idea? Yeah. It becomes like a judgment error problem. It becomes a thing where, man, you probably shouldn't have been like that back then. But it's not like criminal or even, I would say, super like a bad thing. Like when you find out about this guy, you stop hanging out with him because you're like, man, that's disgusting. It's like, I did a few errors in judgment when he was younger.
Well, so yeah, this all boils down to basically a character problem, like you said. Mm-hmm. He should. I mean, all right. Mm-hmm. I'm not super religious. My wife is very Christian and goes to church, and I respect that about her. And I have been to church off and on for my entire life. I'm not a super religious person, but I do believe that God exists. And anyways, it's like a segue. But there's one of the prayers that we had to learn. I grew up Catholic, and one of the prayers we had to learn is called the Lord's Prayer. And there's a line in the Lord's Prayer that says, "And lead me not into temptation, but deliver us from evil." So, I mean, the religious people, and this is a basic, and of course, it's a religious prayer, but even if you're not religious, that's good advice, right? Like, it helps you avoid temptation because humans are inherently sinners. it's just human nature is to error, or to err is human, whatever that saying is. But so humans make mistakes. Um,
Yeah.
this podcast is
So
random. That's weird.
that's a great
Um,
segue actually because
but so is his. He has bad character, obviously. Anyways, continue.
it's a good segue because someone else who got attacked with cancel culture is a certain Joey Diaz. And Joey Diaz is so the thing in question that he got accosted for is about 10 or so years ago, more 10 or 15 years ago. He was on the Joe Rogan podcast and he was telling a story about when he was getting started up in stand-up comedy. That he was all open micer and he was talking to some of the other girls. He'd say, "Oh, I'll give you stage time if you give me a blowy," and stuff like that. And whatever. And then Joe Rogan kind of chuckled at it, and that's it. And now they're like, "Well, cancel Joe Rogan because he laughed at it, and cancel Joey Diaz because of this." Now this one takes. So I just could show this little clip, this screenshot first, and then go into the context. Because this is where this gets interesting. You know, you can do this without consequences, whatever. Now, the context of this, if for anyone who doesn't know Joey Diaz, he is a crazy person in all the best ways. Now, he is a person who came through a very rough life, and he is a redeemed person now. So, and in his previous life, so the little context to this guy, his father wasn't in the picture growing up. He had a rough neighborhood. He grew up when he was 12. He got on acid, and he came home and found his mom dead on the floor. So that's kind of the world Joey Diaz is from. He comes from a rough life. He, had a very, tumultuous growing up. And at one point, he went to prison for several years because he kidnapped someone at gunpoint and threw him in his trunk of his car. And so that's what this guy is. This guy, went to prison for armed kidnapping, right? Which is not good at all. And in prison, he started to make jokes and stuff and learn how to be a stand-up. And then when he got out of prison, he had a lot of cocaine addiction problems and things like that. And now he's a very successful comedian who makes a lot of people laugh, recounting a lot of his old crazy Coke Day stories and a lot of crazy Uncle Joey. That's what he is. He's a nice, harmless, sweet person now who's been through some nasty stuff in the past, and his whole story and his whole shtick is recounting his wild past and talking about it. And to a certain extent, I guess that's inspirational that he came through some crazy things. Now, in this particular case, he kind of some other witnesses have come forward, so to speak, that have kind of mentioned that he knew the exact thing he was talking about, and he was embellishing it for the sake of storytelling. That basically, when he was an open micer, having a hard time getting stage time, he would joke with this other girl who was also, they both had a drug problem at the time. And he would joke with them about, "Oh, you do this, I'll give you stage time." And so then they would, do a lot of stuff, including drugs together and things like that. But he had no power to give stage time. He was just happy to get some himself. But he joked about it like that. And then now they're trying to cancel him again after he's said some crazy things over the years. And it's like a clear stab at just trying to find anything that he said over the years and just we're just discovering who this guy is. Let's try to, we don't even know who he is. Let's try to cancel him. And it's funny because in this case, it really did not work. It backfired because people started to go looking up his past stories, and they realized, oh wow, this guy, this is literally what this guy does, is talk about crazy stuff that happened back when he had drug problems, back when he was in prison or before that. And it's like they're trying to cancel him for having a story. And he he has really leaned into this in a crazy way. So for example, here he is saying, if that video hurt your feelings, watch this one. I'm not going to read the whole thing because he's I don't want to subject the audience to that kind of reading if they don't need to. But basically, if that one hurts your feelings, watch this. Joey Diaz sleeps with one-legged woman. It's like, oh god, he's full of crazy stories like that, and that's kind of like what he does. And then in this leaning into things, he just said basically his TLDR of that is, on the seventh day, God created balls, and you guys don't have any. Which is basically just saying, I'm not changing. I'm not doing anything. I'm still doing my own thing. And it's funny how this guy has a crazy story, crazy background. It's kind of the part of his career today is who he was before, is his comeback story, his redemption story. And he's come back from a lot of bad things he did, and he talks about them, and now people are don't care about him, don't care about his story, are just finding random bits that he talked about. He was on, obviously as a friend of Joe Rogan, he was on his podcast, and also as an entertaining and fascinating guest. He's talking about his past, his crazy past, like, whoa, that's crazy. And now they're trying to cancel someone, in this case Joe Rogan, for having someone on his podcast telling crazy stories of the past, basically making an interesting podcast. It's like, oh man, like, what will be left if you cancel everything? What will be left if no one can have had a past and talk about how much they screwed up in the past and just use that as part of a story to inspire others or make others laugh or whatever? And I think that this is starting to hit the point where it's like a bridge too far.
On this one, I'm kind of, I'm a little torn on this one. So if he was promising young female comedians stage time in order to get sexual favors, that is highly inappropriate. Even if he couldn't fulfill the promise, right? Like if they thought he could fulfill the promise, then that's kind of like, that's a little shady. You know, I mean, if they're just doling out sexual favors because they want to get on stage, that's pretty much, what I mean, if it's consensual, it's consensual. But if he's lying, you know what I mean, to sleep with women or get sexual favors or whatever, that's all right. Everybody has a past. You know, I have done some unsavory things in my life. I'm not, nobody's perfect. But like, so America, like, I mean, this kind of ties into like our whole theme, right? Like, America is not perfect. Like, yes, America had slaves. We had African American slaves. We had Irish slaves. We had some other slaves. Slavery was part of our country when we were founded, and the founders didn't like it. And they tried to, I mean, it took 70 and 90 years to get rid of it, right? From the, Declaration of Independence. It was almost 70 years until it was 7 years ago. So it was 87 years. There we go. But we don't celebrate slavery today. And we all, like, as a society, slavery is like a stain on American society. That I firmly believe that, right? Like, slavery is pretty shitty. Slavery is like probably one of the worst things you can do to a human being, is to enslave them. And General John Stark, one of my favorite quotes of all time is, "Live free or die, for death is not the worst of evils," because there are worse evils than death. And like slavery, I would put in that camp. So we all have a past, and we've all made mistakes. We've all done shitty things, with very few exceptions. I don't know any saints in my life, but to celebrate your shittiness is kind of like if we were like, if we were out celebrating slavery right now and BLM was like burning down, like, like the KKK, if we were like slavery was great, it was a great part of American history. And just for those that are going to edit that, because I'm running for office, I do not think slavery is great.
Yes.
Right. So like, if we're going to run out and celebrate slavery,
now, then
like, we deserve to be canceled. But nobody's going to celebrate slavery. So you just don't celebrate your shitty acts. Like, if you have learned from it and you made a comeback and you recognize that you did shitty things, talk about it. But
let me throw a nuanced wrinkle of this. I've been watching some interesting videos from a former mob enforcer, right? He was an enforcer for the mob. He did a bunch of stuff. And literally his claim to fame in his reformed life is his past life. He goes around and he talks, and they ask him, "So, what did you do? Let's put a camera on you and have you tell about all these awful things you did. Tell me what it's like to be a criminal." And then that's kind of what he talks about. That's his story. That's what he does. And at the same time, a pretty much every stand-up comedian or does some kind of making fun of their family situation, of their life, or yeah, my dad yelled at me, never loved me, and all ha ha ha. It's funny, and it's part of it is taking that the craziness and the pain of bad experiences and making them funny, making something someone can laugh about, and then bring that
Well,
back. And
right.
it's
No, no, no. And
exactly the same
and
thing.
I totally agree with that. Like, I totally agree with that, right? Like, because I mean, that's how I cope with, like bad memories that I have. I make really crude and crass jokes about them,
Yeah.
like where I felt, where I was hurt, or where I felt like, the victim of whatever, right? Like if somebody did something to me, and like in my childhood, like my mom was kind of a drug addict and an alcoholic, and we can go into that some other day. But like I joke about it. I'm like, oh yeah, I never saw my mom because she was always at the corner store buying scratch tickets and Coke. Like it was like I joke about it because that's how you deal with situations like that. But if you're joking about you taking advantage of somebody else, that's just like a different level of shitty.
In a way, could be.
Like
If you're
I don't know.
joking,
Like I get what you're saying.
if you're
I
joking
get
in a
what you're. Yeah.
gloating sort of a way, but if you're joking about, man, back in the day,
Right.
I used to be crazy. I used to be such a jackass. Whatever else, there's a lot of humor, like of self-deprecating humor in having it, and that's the thing about when you're like a storyteller telling about all the crazy days. Oh, let me tell you about the times. Like say you're, and it's kind of funny because a lot of famous stand-up comedians have come from Alcoholics Anonymous because they were, they were in recovery and they got a lot of stage time telling their stories about, man, I used to, back when I half bottle of Jack Daniels later, and then before you know it, I was doing this, ha, and then said it in a way that made the other fellow recovering alcoholics laugh, and then that just ended up being a career to where they're saying, man, back when I was a drunk crazy person, this is what I did, and this happened. Everyone's like, ah, that's hilarious. Here, give me money to say more of this kind of stuff, and just kind of weaponizing the past. And it's exactly the sort of thing this fellow is doing. And in this case, though, literally that's 100% of his career. If people didn't like the crazy past stories, he would not have a career. And nothing has changed in his entire career except randomly, and of all the stories, like I've heard, like he's like, oh man, I was with this one chick, and then I took a name, I took, we went to a hotel and this and stuff, and after we're done, I just left. I took all her money. I just robbed her on the way out. It's like, oh wow, okay, that's crazy. Like he has all these kinds of stories of doing some really objectionable things, and obviously with the context of I don't do that today. Like I'm not that. I was a crazy person. I was on all kinds of drugs and stuff. And it's kind of funny to take not knowing who this person is, pick a random one of them, I wouldn't say tamer, but a not one of the most crazy stories, and just say, you're telling this makes you a bad person. Well, yeah, probably. It made him a bad person in the day, that's for sure. And therefore, we're going to try to cancel you and anyone who had you on to tell your crazy story. Which is like, let's cancel Netflix for having the Leonardo DiCaprio, Tom Hanks movie, Catch Me If You Can, on about this guy who used to counterfeit money. And it's a movie about this time. You're giving that story a platform. It's like, you can't do that. And it ends up being when you start running out of material to honestly target, of someone is saying horrible things right now and they're serious and they're getting away with it and they've done possibly criminal acts, and let's get rid of those people. Let's do something to knock down that platform, which that's an even different conversation about censorship, but that's for a different day. But then you start going from there to something completely different, and then there you go.
Well, right. I mean, that's the different. Like, if somebody, like, there was that it was the Senate race, a Senate special election, I think, in Georgia, and it was in 2018, maybe. And the dude had been like, it was like they were like dragging up accusations from like 40 years in the past of like creepy relationships, but not illegal ones.
Yeah.
So they were like, oh, when he was 31, and the guy was 70. They were like, when he was 31, he dated a 16-year-old, and it's like, well, it was 40 years ago. like he's a married man with grandchildren. So I don't know. Maybe he did something
Yeah,
stupid 40 years
and
ago. Like,
it
is that
could
a
be
reason to like, and
context.
like,
It could be context to who he is as a person today, especially if he hid stuff like that. But it's not hugely relevant. And it's like when we talk about creepy Joe Biden type
right. Like
stuff.
if he was still dating 16-year-olds at the age of 71, even though he was married with grandchildren that were probably older than 16,
Mm-hmm.
then okay, yeah, let's cancel that dude out because he's a creep, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's lock him away because he does not belong in society. But I mean, if he like whatever something happened 40 years ago, and he, but I mean, like if he's like you said, it's like it's an insight into his character today. Like, is he hiding it? Like, is he lying about it? Like, did he do these things 40 years ago and then like just cover it up and like hope it never came out, and then it came out and he's still lying about it, and like, all
Yeah,
right, so the dude's a liar and a creep. Okay, I get it.
yeah. And it's like, so for example, one of those contexts, one of the similar cases reminds me of Robert Byrd. And back in the day, he was a prominent member of the Klan, and I do think that that's an important. I mean, he's no longer with us, obviously, but I think for his political career, that's an important piece of information to know that this person used to be part of a very objectionable organization. And at the same time, as much as I didn't agree with what he said, or I didn't really like him as a politician, I don't think that I believe he did an effort to move past that in some way. Now, whether that was for the cameras, for his career, and he was still a racist in the back, who knows? But it doesn't matter. It's still like kind of a judgment of past thing. But that would be kind of funny is if say George W. Bush decided to go on a book tour or a talk speaking tour or something like that, and then people found out a clip of like, oh, did you see this? He used to be an alcoholic and a drug addict and stuff like that, and then cancel George W. It's like, oh, dude, that was so long ago, and he has kind of talked about how that's part of his story about how he was in a bad place and he got out of it, and then he made something of himself and became the president. And it's just kind of like having that come out now. It's like, dude, why? It's very, it's very common, and especially if it's a situation where you have basically all you do is dish on your past for decades and decades. Just say, yeah, back in the day I did this stuff and it wasn't good. Back in the day I did that other stuff that wasn't good, and that's like literally you're like the most upfront thing you could be. But different strokes for different folks, definitely. And it kind of goes back to the same thing about what is a cancel culture meant to do. Now, if you raise awareness to someone being a bad person or saying things that are objectionable, and all that feeds into, oh, now the people that supported you don't anymore. You lose fans, audience members, voters, whatever your metric is. You lose those people, and it impacts your career. All right, that's fine. That's to be expected. I mean, if you don't, no one is guaranteed perfect a perfect support by everyone. It's okay. Now, on the other hand, though, a lot of times, you say you have someone who's very popular, whether it's and this doesn't really work that much in elections because elections, that's literally your one supporter is your voters. But in case of if you're a media personality, if say you say, oh, this person did this person did that, and then the fans or wherever, or for the large, mostly just like, yeah, okay, I don't care, I still like the guy. But then you don't want to just say take no for an answer. Don't want to say, look, I've exposed this guy for what he's worth, and people don't really care. Okay, that's where it is. Rather than that, you start going after their advertisers or their people like these companies behind him that also support this guy and support what he does. But as soon as they start feeling, oh no, we could get branded something else, they're extremely risk averse. They would rather just drop paying someone, drop working with them, rather than be exposed to something else. And so then you have a whole bunch of people who get canceled who aren't even the people that are the supporters of this person. And that's something that we get it gets a little bit dirty, where you try to bully companies into not working with people who are very, very successful just because there's some controversy associated with them, but not a controversy that would cause them to actually lose fans and supporters. Yeah, you got a frozen face for a long time, but that's okay. Everyone knows what you
Yeah,
look like.
yeah. My face is well, it froze on a decent clip anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I mean, like, who is the arbiter of what deserves to be canceled, right? Because I disagree with a lot of people that say a lot of things, and I don't want to cancel them. Like AOC talking about the Green New Deal. Now I hope she gets voted out of office,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't want to like destroy her life. Maybe she can go back to bartending, or she can use her economics degree, or whatever the case is. Like, there's very few people that I just want to cancel. I like cancel outright. Like, and I don't know if that's just an ideological difference, but like, I mean, now
Could
if
be.
somebody was like actively raping women, like, okay, cancel that dude, put him
and
in jail.
and that's
Like, he's
not at
actually
that point.
violating rights of other
That's
people.
not like a cancel thing. That's more of a you're willing to take an activist role there, as in actually get rid of this guy, put him out of the community where you can get him to stop hurting people. Because it's not just I don't like this guy, he's unsavory. It's like no, this guy's a danger. We need to protect the community against him. But in the interim, I mean,
Right.
that was really what the original purpose of, I guess, of cancel culture was to find people who had done criminal acts and who were untouchable for whatever reason and make them touchable by the justice system. That's kind of the idea. And then at some point it escalated to, oh, these are creepy people that have done terrible things, but they're not quite illegal. So we should still try to get everyone to know how bad they are, and so they can make their own decisions and boycott them and not buy their merchandise anymore, not patronize them anymore. And then at that point, they get canceled by their audience, whatever. That's good. Now, and now you get to the next level, which is what
Well, that's like a free market thing,
yes,
right? Like, that's
exactly.
free market. Like, okay,
Now we
like
get to the next level,
like
which
if I went
is
to
bully.
if I yeah, go ahead.
Now it goes to the next level, which is first off, it's not even people who've done reprehensible things and just outside of what the law would actually do. Now you got people that are, it's a much murkier line of, well, I don't know, he said stuff that just sounded right, and I don't like that what it does for, I just don't like the way it sounds. I don't like the message it seems to send. And then rather than just trying to go to the audience, now it's trying to go to the middleman to cut them off and basically not say, hey, did you know this guy's doing this? And oh no, we didn't. Oh, we'll stop doing business with them right away. It's like, did you know this guy's doing this? Yeah, but he seems fine to us. We like him. Oh, well, guess what? We're going to destroy you and make your company mud if you don't break a relationship with him. Even though he's popular, even though his audience loves him, even though everything's great, you will bully you into ceasing relationships with him. And at that point, that starts to become a little bit of a problem. And we're starting to see the limits of that, where you have more and more people starting to publish their own things to work for themselves, so then they're uncancelable in that way. And also you're starting to see more companies and things just become less, just not caring as much about minor uproars, about manufacturer, getting more used to the whole cancel thing. And of course that brings us all the way back around to Whole Foods. Is Whole Foods going to be canceled because of company policy of you can't wear political slogans on your uniforms while you're at work? I don't think so. I think in the past you could have probably bullied a lot of companies into doing that. I think probably now they're just going to have some, oh, well, we could this, or then they're going to donate to some charity or something, and then it'll all go back to normal. I mean, and that's the thing about the cancel waves, is the more you have, the more they lose their potency. And eventually, if you're just like, oh yeah, everyone's being canceled now. Well, if everyone's being canceled, then no one's being canceled. And that's kind of where I leave it for today.
Well, right. I mean, that's exactly right. Like, if you cancel everybody that you disagree with, then nobody will be canceled because nobody's going to care. Like you have to. I mean, it's like you're gonna pick your battles, right? Like if everybody's a criminal, then nobody's a criminal. If everybody, whatever, if everybody's a racist, then like if you like they've been throwing this racist word around for the last 5 years, and it means nothing anymore. It literally means nothing because anybody that agrees with Trump is a racist.
Yeah.
Like if you voted for Trump, you're a racist. If you voted for Mitch McConnell, you're a racist. Like they've been throwing this racist word around for, I don't know, 5 years. 5 years is about right. I mean, it's probably been longer than that, but like Trump really brought it into the forefront. Like Trump is racist. Like Trump wants to end DACA. Racist. Like, I mean, it's not really a racist thing to do, but he's a racist. So, I mean, if everybody's a racist, the word loses all of its meaning, and there are no racists anymore because the word it doesn't exist. And so if everything's canceled, nothing's canceled. So I mean, if Whole Foods didn't allow you to wear your Black Lives Matter T-shirt to work, when you have a dress code, they stop it. Just stop it. Everybody is like so like Aunt Jemima, Uncle Ben's, like no one cares.
Well, and that's
right.
That's the real problem.
No one cares.
Is that
just grow up. Grow up.
That's why I call it the red herring, the cancel culture red herring, is because there are some bad people out there still. There's still some people that hate others based on the way they look. There's still people making decisions to hurt those people based on there. And they're getting away. They're getting away with it because everyone's distracted chasing after Whole Foods for their shirts.
There are actually racists out there. The KKK still exists as far as I know. They're much smaller. And like if you know somebody part of the KKK, torches. Then yes, they should be. I have tiki torches in my yard because I don't like fucking mosquitoes.
Okay.
Like it's not a racist symbol. It's
you've
a tiki
just canceled
torch
yourself.
Filled with citronella and it blows the mosquitoes
canceled.
away. I canceled myself because I swore, and I have tiki torches. And like I guess what I have pigs and chickens too that I slaughter on my own. Call up PETA because I'm offensive to them. And I eat bacon and I drink coffee and I don't care how you feel about it. I don't, because I don't care, because I'm not responsible for your feelings. So grow up and manage your feelings like an adult.
Yes.
If you walk down the aisle and you are triggered by an Aunt Jemima syrup bottle, you need therapy.
Probably.
Honest to God, you need therapy. Like if it's that offensive to you that you need to cancel the whole brand, you need therapy. And like, I get it. You might not like it. Maybe you actually are offended by the Aunt Jemima bottle. And I am not going to discount your like if you're a descendant of slaves and you're offended by the Aunt Jemima bottle because of the horrible things that some people in this country did to your family, fine. But do you really need to cancel the whole brand? Can't you just buy a different brand of crappy syrup? Seriously, it's like the worst syrup that ever existed.
Yeah,
like it's horrible. I will never buy Aunt Jemima because it's bad syrup, not because there's a black woman on the cover and her name's Aunt Jemima. That's not why. Like I buy real maple syrup. We live in New Hampshire. Real maple syrup's everywhere. Get real maple syrup and stop complaining about the shit in the grocery store.
Well, hey.
God, grow up, people. It's so frustrating that it's like, just grow up. Like, why do you care? Like, if you want to protest over George Floyd's killing, I get it. That is a legitimate thing to protest about. The dude should not be dead. The cop was an asshole, and he's getting charged with murder. But if you get offended by everything in the friggin' groceries, like, are we going to cancel Goya because it's a Mexican culture appropriation and there's no Mexicans in Peterborough? Give me a friggin' break.
So this has been Live Free and Rant.
I exerted myself.
This has been Live Free and Rant. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Thank you for participating and canceling us. We're honored to be canceled. But tune in next week because we still might be. We might be canceled. We may not be, but we'll still give it a try. Thanks for the first time listeners. Thanks to the repeat listeners.
If Facebook and YouTube cancel us, we will be on library, lbry.tv. It's the decentralized YouTube. You can't be canceled there. There is no such thing as cancel culture on library. You can only upvote and donate to good content. So follow us over on lbry.tv. We're at Live Free and Rant and at the Desert Links with one S because he is not dessert. So check us out over there, lbry.tv. And we'll see you next week.
See you next week. Prepare for another epic